Hello, Whovians, and welcome back to Tom's Comedy Club. Now, we've just done the completely wrong intro, but we'll roll with it. We'll roll with the punches. See, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will be watching this on Tom's Comedy Club, so that will make perfect sense, but we'll do the podcast intro in a second. Now, if you are watching this on YouTube, you might notice something slightly different. Well, I've now got a red tie, and the reason for that is because the blue tie, sadly, after the Chris Cantrell episode of Joking Apart, it sadly died. Sadly, I can't be bothered making one of those little square things with little years on it with a picture. No, I can't bother doing that. So we'll mourn its death when I can be bothered, which isn't right now. But we shall begin today. I am doing another wonderful interview, and we're part of the second episode of Joking Apart, the amazing podcast that should be as popular as Absolutely Buzzing, which is another fantastic podcast that my guest has been on. So let's crack on. My guest is best known as a stand-up comedian and one of the guests on a fantastic podcast, Absolutely Buzzing. It's the one and only Ted Hill.
Howdy! That's a lovely introduction. Thank you very much for having me.
You're welcome. So let's start at the very beginning, because it's a very good place to start. But we don't start with ABC or 1, 2, 3 or Do Re Mi. How did you get into comedy?
Well, I've always wanted to do comedy, really. Ever since probably like I was bullied and realized that being funny meant I got bullied less is realistically what it is. But I like to imagine it being more noble than that. Where it's kind of ever since I was about 13, 14, I'd didn't really like music as a kid. I just liked to listen to like Radio 4 comedy shows and like CDs of comedy albums. A particular favorite of mine, there was a series of a radio show called Mark Watson Makes the World Substantially Better that I had an audiobook version of, I think, that I got from iTunes, and I listened to that maybe about 30 times in lieu of music. And I still could have the theme tune knocking around in my head. But then I discovered on YouTube that there were like stand-up special videos, so I watched all of them. And then by the time I was about 15, 16, I wanted to do it. I tried it once when I was 16 in a vegetarian restaurant in a Hertfordshire town near where I lived, and it went very badly, very, very badly indeed. Not a lot of people want to know what a 16-year-old has got to say, and that is totally fair enough. I put that on ice, and then when I was at university, I had a go at it again, and it went a little bit better, and I really enjoyed it. And I was primarily at university because I wanted to become a monkey scientist, to the extent that I began the process of becoming a monkey scientist, but I quit that because I liked doing comedy so much. And I found science a bit boring. And now here I am with less money than I would have as a scientist, that's for sure.
What is a monkey scientist? Is that the same as a normal scientist, a monkey scientist?
Well, it's like someone might be like a climate scientist that they study. I would be a scientist that studies monkeys. The correct term is primatologist. But when I say primatologist, people go, "What does that mean?" And I inevitably have to say monkey scientist anyway. So now I just default to saying monkey scientist.
Well, I thought you saying you were a scientist that makes monkey noises.
No, that is I don't think that is a type of scientist in truth.
No, and so you were saying there about listening to Radio 4. Was there any other Radio 4 shows that you liked listening to at the time?
I liked the Now Show, and I loved the news. Not the news quiz. I actually didn't really like the news quiz. I shouldn't say that. News quiz is great. Please have me on it. I loved Just a Minute. I thought Just a Minute was so much fun. I used to like listen to that every week, never live, because I was a very early adopter of podcasts when I had to download them off the internet and then drag the files onto my MP3 player and then listen to them the next day on the bus. I would do that with Radio 4 shows like Just a Minute, which was my favorite.
I also absolutely love Just a Minute. Now, have you ever seen any? Because it was, from my recollection, there's been about 3 versions. But have you seen any of the TV versions of Just a Minute?
I have never seen a TV version of Just a Minute. Just
because
a Minute.
the BBC did 2, and then ITV did 1.
Are they good?
Well, the ITV one lasted for an episode, so that's
So no, that
well,
doesn't.
the ITV wasn't, but then the 2 BBC ones were quite good. The first one had a better intro than the second, because the second came out in 2016, and then the originals came out in the 90s. So they're both really good, but this original version of the TV version was better than the rebooted version of the TV version.
Right, I see. That makes sense.
That makes hopefully that makes sense, because it should theoretically make sense. And the also Australia, whilst we're on about Radio 4, Australia made a TV version of David Mitchell's program, Unbelievable Truths.
Was that good?
And that is quite good because Sarah Kendall was on it.
Oh, I will seek that out. Is that available to watch in legal or illegal
It's on
ways?
YouTube.
On
I don't know
YouTube, yeah,
if
okay.
YouTube's legal or illegal. If isn't the YouTuber watching the thing illegal, it's probably the uploaders.
Yeah, it's a grey area, but I'm fine with it.
Yeah, the government haven't upset anyone yet. So now moving on from away from the area of radio, was there any TV shows as a child, a nipper, a small human that also inspired you to get into this industry? We're calling laughter comedy. Ha ha ha!
Mock the Week was definitely my favorite like comedy show. I remember the first couple of seasons of it. I remember seeing John Oliver on it and really liking John Oliver because
Yeah,
I'd heard John Oliver on a Radio 5 panel show called Fighting Talk that I think is still running, where you do the sports punditry, and he was always very funny on that. And then I saw him on Mock the Week and was like, oh, this guy is really, really good. And I became a bit of a fan of him and Andy Zaltzman through that. So I liked Mock the Week a lot. And I used to try and like play scenes we'd like to see in like drama class at
yeah.
school. And it was, not to brag, but I was the best in the class at it. But we were all very bad because we all assumed that they improvised it, which of course they don't.
And speaking of Mock the Week, for viewers that are interested, there is Mock the Week might return in well, the BBC don't know about this, but it might return in a definitely not official format called definitely not Mock the Week, where I rip off Mock the Week, but definitely make sure that I don't get copyrighted.
Oh
So
wow,
uh,
that's a scoop.
yeah, so it's going to be called definitely not Mock the Week, and
Right.
I've removed all the news elements and kept all the best bits.
Right. So where does the weak bit come in? Are you spelling weak WEAK?
No, it's the same. I'm just wrong. The word definitely on top.
Right. Okay.
And the intro for the show is the Mock the Week intro, but backwards.
Right.
Yeah.
That sounds like that would sound awful. That that song
But it
played
actually sounds
backwards.
quite good, actually. I was rather impressed. It
Yeah. That's interesting.
sounds,
I've never yet heard a song that sounds good played backwards, but maybe that one News of the World will be.
oh, We Will Rock You, the opening line, the bunt backwards sounds really good.
I'll seek that out as well.
Don't ask me why I know that. I just do.
No,
Uh,
I'm going to. Why do you know that?
well, because a teacher said it sounds really good backwards, so I filmed a whole video and then added it as a backing track backwards.
How did the teacher? Okay, well we'll move on.
But not only are you a ha comedian, you're also, and let's make sure I say the word right because I never say it right. No, yeah, I'm gonna be confident in this. An executive producer. What's it like being an executive producer?
Um, I so this is interesting. So, is this? Did you get this from the British Comedy Guide?
Uh, no, I think it was either that or your website.
Yeah, I think on the British Comedy Guide, I'm down as being an executive producer on a couple of TV shows, which I have absolutely no involvement in. I think that there is somebody else called Ted Hill that a few years ago executive produced a couple of TV shows.
Well, the only Ted Hill that I've heard of, other than you, is well, I've never heard of him either. He's a sportsman. He does.
Yeah, a rugby guy. There's
Yeah,
a rugby guy.
yeah.
who is younger and more famous than me, which is great.
Well, I mean, he's only famous in the sports world, so that doesn't
That's the truth. But I would say that I'm barely even famous in the comedy world. So that's he's big, but that's fine because he might get substantial brain injuries from his thing, and I probably won't from mine. So I think I'm the real winner.
This sounds like a topic that should be on Richard Herring's podcast. Richard Herring loves the good. Finding out if someone else has the same name as someone else. That's Richard.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah. So are we saying that British Comedy Guide has got this information wrong?
Well, yeah, no, I think it's just that the algorithm has says that there's because I mean obviously there's somebody called Ted Hill that's worked on some shows, and it bundles us together, and I don't know if there's a solution to that, but I think it's
I can have a word.
What? Okay, I mean, you should go ahead, have a word if you like.
I'm very good at picking up with errors. They had said that Miranda was getting a new series, and they've been saying that for the last few years. And I told them that wasn't true, and then they removed it. So
I don't know what I guess they could split the things into two, but it doesn't. I don't think there's other Ted Hill guys done a lot lately, and I haven't done. I wasn't doing anything back when he was. This was like 5 years ago when he was making those shows. Not to besmirch whoever that Ted Hill is. And if you are listening, Ted, it would be lovely to let's collaborate. You can executive produce something if you like of mine.
Imagine you create a brand new special for Netflix, and the executive producer is another Ted Hill.
That would. I think if I were the other Ted Hill, I wouldn't take that job because it would feel like I'm not getting any of the credit for that, because if people saw that it was the show had my name in the title and then it said executive producer Ted Hill, I think they'd be right to assume that was me. So it would sort of be like getting away without credit. One of us would have to take an initial, and I'm not. There's no way I'm not becoming Ted F Hill. No way, absolutely not.
It'd be like getting away with murder.
It would be in some ways and not in others.
Yeah. So swiftly moving on from that blunder, which is all well and good. So now British Comedy Guide know to fix that problem. We'll get that fixed, and if anyone else Googles your name, they'll come up with two separate people. One with an image, one without an image, because you've got an image on your profile, and this other Ted Hill might not have a.
Yeah, I've got a lot of it. Yeah, executive producers don't get images.
No, unless they're also in the program as well, such as the people from the US, the Six Idiots, the Ghosts lot. They get executive producer rights for the US version.
And yes.
Matt's in an episode of series 2 of Ghosts US.
Right, well then they do deserve their picture. I mean, everyone deserves a picture. It's just whether or not there's a picture easily available for the code to scrape.
Yeah.
And because I have a website, there's plenty of pictures of me.
There is, which is a website you all should be Googling after this. Obviously, stick around. Now, not only have you been a comedian, and not only has another person with the same name been an executive producer, you've also, according to your website, seen now I'm hesitant whether this is
no, the stuff on my website is right.
All right, okay, right. I'll say it with more confidence this time. So how did presenting at the Science Museum help you do comedy? Because it's not similar, but it's not too different also.
No, it is quite similar in truth. It's like standing on stage and talking to people. It makes you better at standing on stage talking to people. It makes you better at improvising. It makes you better at talking to kids, doing stuff for kids, which has helped me a few times. I sometimes do practice jokes that are sort of kid. If I have a joke that's kind of kid friendly, but is probably kids won't laugh at, I'll still tell it and see if the grown-ups laugh, which is helpful. There's been a couple of things I've originally used to say in Science Museum shows that I then have like turned into stand-up. And again, it probably is worth noting that I don't speak for the Science Museum at any point. Whenever this comes up, I always have to mention that because I do still currently work there part time. So I do not everything that I will say in this. I do not speak for the Science Museum.
And how did you end up requiring the job at the Science Museum?
How did I end up requiring it?
Yeah, like getting
Like,
it.
is it? Oh, right. I thought you meant like, well, how did I end up needing it? It was
Oh, yeah,
this
it was like
this
a top.
basic I rent. Well, I when I left university, I got a job at a zoo. I won't say which zoo it is, but it's in the town of Whipsnade. And this zoo, my job there, I was a presenter, so I would like do the talks on the animals because I had a background in animals because I knew a lot about monkeys, and I had done comedy, so I was good at public speaking. So that job was quite a natural thing for me. And then I moved from there to London, and I was looking to do similar things in my sort of daytime while I was doing the comedy. And I bumped around a few other jobs, but then when that one at the museum came up, I jumped at it because it seemed like the perfect fit for me because I'm a bit of a sciencey guy, and it's worked out well. I've been there for a while and I like it. It's a fun place to go into work from time to time.
Yeah, so as the superheroes always say, by day you're a science museum presenter, by night you're an edgy comedian.
Yes, I mean edgy is not if edgy is short for like educational maybe, but I'm certainly not edgy.
Well, I don't know what you class as edgy anymore because when they say alternative comedy, you never think of modern comedians because the word alternative is used for many things now in the modern world.
Yes,
According,
yes,
yeah,
it is. It sort of is. I do quite a lot of I do alternative comedy, but I would not describe myself as an alternative comedian because that label has got. It's not that it's got lots of baggage. It's just that it's got thousands of meanings, and that it doesn't give me good control over my brand
yeah.
to be saying that.
When I think,
I am edgy though. I
yeah,
am.
and when I think of alternative comedy, I always think of Rick Mail hurting Aid Edmondson because why not?
Yes, no, that is I would say is your very standard alternative comedy. But then, is there a standard for something that is as long as it's? I feel like alternative comedy is anything that's different from whatever is the prevailing comedy at the time.
Yeah. So it's anything that's not different. So so now we move on to a format question. I love a good format question. Now, what was the comedy scene like? When I mean scene, I mean like the circuit, but I call it a scene, even though it could be called a circuit. But two of the words mean the same. But what was the comedy scene slash circuit like when you joined it?
Well, it wasn't that long ago, really. It was sort of only uh, a sort of 4 or 5 years ago. It was I would say largely similar to what it is. I don't know because in that time that I've been doing it, I've been sort of progressing up it in a sort of to use a sort of very self-aggrandizing language, and so the way that I experience is different now that I'm doing it professionally compared to when I was doing little open mic things. But when I've gone and done, it does seem like it's slightly more supportive place than it was even 5 years ago. Just people are a bit nicer, and there don't seem to be quite as many like creepy old men, which is a good thing. There are still some though.
Yeah, and that is probably true. Because they're old, so why would they not?
Yeah, no. So they will die. They will, as will we all, I suppose.
Yeah, we all die we're all dying as we speak.
Yep.
As you get on, as every day moves on, that's one day gone. Uh, but let's keep this happy rather than morbid. So with the way you do your laughter, your entertainment, your comedy, how did you develop your style?
My style developed quite gradually. I started off trying to do just quite normal stand up and then realized that I didn't really like it. So the type of comedy I do is it's multimedia, there's PowerPoints, it's quite geeky. It's a lot of science and maths thrown in there. It's very high energy. The high energy's kind of always been there because I just am a bit of a high energy person. Today, not so much because I'm quite ill, but normally I'm a very high energy person. And the through doing stuff at the museum, I was doing a lot of shows to people where I was using PowerPoint. So I was sort of, and then I was writing shows for the museum. So my mind was sort of in the zone of thinking through creating things in PowerPoint, and through that, I've ended up becoming sort of known as a PowerPoint comedian, which I don't mind. It is logistically very difficult, but it developed through doing a lot of stuff for children, using PowerPoint as an educational tool, and then realizing that you can do some pretty funny stuff with it, and you can tell some jokes that other people can't tell if there's stuff they can see as well as hear.
And so with you being what you would call a PowerPoint comedian, or if we wanted to make a non-copyright word just in case Microsoft were very angry, we could say a slideshow because that seems a very neutral name that no
Yeah,
one get angry at.
a Google slideshow comedian. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, well, we would use the word slides, then Google wouldn't angry with us either.
Yeah, so just sort of maybe just like sort of an Apple Max slideshow kind of guy, you know?
Yeah, and it's the slideshow PowerPoint world in a broad sense is rather small. So you're in this subcategory that I'm calling it, but it's a subcategory that is very powerful because Dave Gorman is also very good at the whole. Here's a slide. I've zoomed in. I've put a box around it. So that sort of grows. So that's what's really good because if you like Dave Gorman, you're more likely to like someone else who does that has another PowerPoint because that person might like a visual element to their comedy rather than a comedian standing there going, "I saw a cat the other day. It was pink." Ha 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 ha. And so that's what sets you apart from your Kerry Pritchard McLean's and from your Mark Watsons and your Dom or not no Dom Jolly also does PowerPoint or slide related things as well.
Yeah, I mean it's a good way to brand yourself, and it can be useful to sort of tap into other people's audiences. But I tend to find that the sort of people that like stuff on a PowerPoint are it actually is most people. It is it's it's kind of like a some people might really like musical comedy, but it's most people like watching good musical. Most I think you just if you like stuff that's funny. I think that my sense of humor is really weird. I think that's what tends to decide whether or not people like or dislike me more than the fact that there are slides. I find.
Yeah. And so with when you say yourself, "Oh, I'm a comedian," there's different. When did you know that you could then start calling yourself a comedian? What point in your either your personal life or your career that made you go, "I am now a comedian"?
Um, Really, as soon as I was doing stand up comedy regularly, I felt happy saying it. Uh, it is. I don't think it's a word that should be people should gatekeep like that. It's just if you're doing a comedian is the name for a person who does comedy. So if you're doing comedy for the first time, you're a comedian. You might only be a comedian during the time you're doing it, but it's entirely up to the individual to decide how they want to define themselves. Um, so from a very early age, I'd call myself a comedian.
Yeah, and that's really interesting because like if you Google the definition of a comedian, the definition of a comedian, from what I found, which I thought was hilarious, because it meant that anyone could be a comedian. Is anyone that does anything that if someone laughs, if like an old woman laughs at you, right, then you're a comedian. That's what Google says. So it's anyone that laughs at you, or if you make a sketch or if you do stand up. So there's three ways to identify yourself as a comedian. If a random people laugh at you, whether or not they're laughing with you or at you, Google hasn't.
Yeah, I think I think if they're laughing at you, it doesn't count. But if Google disagrees, then who am I? Who am I to disagree with Google, which is a great company, really, a good company.
we should get Ted Hill in the Google Pixel adverts.
Yeah, put me in there. My
Unlike,
fee is very high, but go try your luck, Google.
because they say they have celebrities in those adverts, but I can only point out one person.
Yeah, how can they claim to have celebrities when I'm not in it? That's a disgrace.
Yeah, and so with comedy, who else? Oh no, wait. With comedy, what do you what like goal? Have you set yourself any goals? What goals do you want to achieve within comedy? Just not in a year, not in 12 years, not in 4.5 million years, but just in general.
The only goal I really have is I'd like to go on Taskmaster. That would be great. But like I wouldn't really call that a goal because I'm not. It's not really like I'm working towards that. I'm just trying to be better kind of each month than I was the month before. I think that if I set myself a goal, then I'll get all sad if I don't achieve it. So I think it's better to just try and be good.
Yeah, and when people say, "Oh, I want to be on Taskmaster," there's actually no like guideline to say you have to be this well known to be on it, because what they do is you tend to have your high profile guests at one side or the other, and then you have your either one that's not that well known but has done a few things here and there, or someone that's been on TV but isn't like explosion popular. So like this series we had Fern and Munya, because even though Fern's quite popular, she isn't like explosion so popular like Dara or Sarah, and Munya's still relatively brand new, but since then has gone on to being a popular person. So theoretically, at any point when Alex realizes that he's missed the opportunity, you could get the call or the email at any point, really.
It's. I mean, it also probably is just it's being the fee being right and the timings being right and the availability being right, and it's also it's something I would like to do, but it's not something that it's not going to happen for ages anyway. So it's I don't really think about that unless someone asks me if I have any goals.
Yeah. Well, what I think might happen. This is only hypothetical. Is that because the joke in New Zealand, there's not many comedians in New Zealand, and in the UK version, we've now had a few Scottish people, a few Irish people, a couple of one New Zealand, and then we're going to have a Canadian coming on board. So it's not all British people. So I've got a good feeling when they run out of a New Zealand comedian, they'll end up stealing some from the UK for the New Zealand version of Taskmaster.
Potentially, um, I suppose they could do that. I mean, yeah, I could see that happening.
Yeah, because they're filming the Australian version of Taskmaster in New Zealand.
But I think there's got to be there's like even there's I'm sure there are lots of comedians in New Zealand, even if there aren't ones that are well known. I'm sure there are people that would be good on that show that maybe people don't know about.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that Australians and New Zealanders can go between each other's versions quite happily. They tend to intermix a lot in their media.
Yeah, because the person that writes the tasks for the New Zealand version, he's writing the tasks for the Australian version. He's also doing the warm up for the Australian version, because the studio's in Australia, but the Taskmaster House tasks are all done in New Zealand. And moving away now from Taskmaster, and what was it like winning the new comedy of? Whoa, no, whoa.
Yeah,
What was it like in the semi-finals for the new comedy? See, I read my question correctly. What was it like in the semi-finals of the new Top Comedian Awards of 2021?
It was good. I had a good time. It was I enjoyed it. It was a very fun gig. I didn't get through to the final after it, but I still had a nice time. I don't really like comedy competitions in general because you come away from it being disappointed if you weren't the best one, and that's not really how it works in comedy normally. You're sort of the goal is the audience needs to have a good night. The promoter's job is to make sure that the audience have a good night, and the comedian's job is to do what the promoter wants them to do, and then you get paid. It doesn't change the audience's impact of the night if one person is really good and everyone else like isn't. That doesn't affect whether or not they have a good time. Your job is just to be good, and I don't like the fact that competitions made me feel like I was good that night, but I was dissatisfied because I wasn't perfect, and that's a shame. That's not a nice way to think.
And for people that might be watching this or listening to this, if they're listening on Apple Podcasts, which I feel sorry for, because I don't like the platform. There'll be a whole video on that, why I hate Apple Podcasts. What advice would you give new comedians that are starting in the world or want to hop on the bandwagon of the stand-up comedy circuit?
I'd say just do it because you will be really bad at it for a while. But the only way you get better at it is by doing it. And it's the advice I got given a lot during Edinburgh this year is that being funny is not actually that important. What's important is being resilient. It's a marathon. It's not a sprint. All you got to do is stay in it. If you keep staying in it, people will just eventually start hiring you for stuff.
And what advice would you give people for like writing the material in the first place?
Oh, I would say the best advice I could give to someone write. I'm not that good at writing sort of normal jokes, but I would say have a point of view. Take an opinion on something. It doesn't have to be your real opinion. It doesn't have to be a good opinion. It doesn't have to be a funny opinion. If you were to try and write a joke about your keys, you'll find it a lot easier if you sort of think, why would somebody hate their keys? Why would somebody love their keys? Why would somebody want to sing about their keys? Why would somebody feel frustrated by their keys? That will tend to send your brain in a good direction. That and be specific. The specific things are always more funny than general things.
And going away from that, have you got any upcoming tour? Have you got a tour coming up next year?
I don't have a tour. No, I've got some dates in the works for my old show I did at the Fringe last year. I'm going to be doing a few run outs of that. None of those are confirmed and locked in yet, but they'll sort of be February, March, and April time, and mostly in London. And then I'm also going to be doing my new show, which I'm going to take to the Fringe next year, which is about climate change, which I'm sort of trying out for the first time early next year at Vault Festival in London, because I'm a London centric person because I live here.
And you've also appeared on the slightly still brand new podcast, Absolutely Buzzing. How did you get involved to be as a guest on that bizarre concept of a podcast?
Well, that's because I met Mia in Edinburgh. Was all it was. I think I vaguely knew her on Twitter first, I think, and then I met her in Edinburgh while she was flyering. Yeah, that was it really. That was a weird podcast. And I don't know if they listen to this. If they do, great. Very unprofessional the way they ran it. It was it felt like I was holding the whole thing together and they were squabbling with each other, which was quite fun. I had a really nice time doing it.
Yeah. Did you see any of the BuzzFeed quizzes on the screen whilst you were recording, or did they have to read everything out to you?
Initially, their plan was to read it out to me. I asked them to send me a link so I could see it on the screen.
And what if you had got to make your own podcast? What would your own podcast be about?
Oh, I don't know, and that's why I've never done a podcast because I don't have any brilliant ideas for what they would be. I thought yeah, I don't know. I think it's best to not do a podcast unless you really, 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 really want to, because there's so many that you have to be so passionate about it, and I don't yet have an idea that I'm super, super passionate about yet.
Well, a lot of podcasts now are like turning like a lot of radio shows now are podcasts on at the same time. So you can listen to Jason Manford's radio show, but as a podcast rather than as a radio show. And so I could sort of see, and it must be someone more intelligent than me, a sort of like science related panel show where none of the questions are actually accurate. Like like an unscientific panel show. I can see that.
Yeah, there's things like that, and but then I think that, in my opinion, I think panel shows always work better live. I think that the the experience of a panel show is quite weird. It's quite a weird thing, and I feel like podcasts you want to be it's quite intimate, and it's something that you're sort of, it feels like you're having a conversation. Whereas a panel show is not like a conversation. It's much more like a performance, and so I find that they tend to work better live. I've done things like that, not that I've produced, but that other people have set up, and it's always been quite fun.
And what? And if you were got to be on a panel show, like one of the TV ones, what panel show would you like to be on?
I mean, I would say, if we're not, I would count Taskmaster as a panel show, but if we're not, then I would say 8 out of 10 Cats does Countdown, because I like doing Countdown. I think that's fun. I'd like to play Countdown on TV. I'd like to go on normal Countdown, in truth.
Yeah, I could see you on 8 out of 10 Castle Countdown because they have the Dictionary Corner with the newest acts on the block on there.
Yeah, I could see myself doing that at some point.
And if you were in Dictionary Corner, what would you bring to the table?
I'd
What?
bring some slideshow is what I would bring.
Uh,
About, I don't know. I would just probably, what people normally do is they tend to do one of their safest bits of like weirdish stand up.
yeah.
Like if they have like a song, they would do their song and things like that. I know when Beck Hill went on it, she did like one of her more well known, one of her sort of safe banker flip chart things. I would do one of my like solid bits of material with a screen there.
Yeah. And so coming towards the end of this amazing interview, so now that we've discovered a lot more about you, one of your stand-up sets that you can watch on YouTube, because you have your own YouTube channel, was where you spoke about the president of America. You made a spreadsheet about it. How long did it exactly take you to make a spreadsheet about all the presidents to later on find out that one already existed?
Well, I the thing is, it kind of took me about a year and a half because I was doing it very slowly because it was all building towards uh, the show that I did last summer about all of the presidents. So the spreadsheet itself wasn't truly finished until like 18 months after I'd kind of first thought of it. So, but then in terms of like pure time, minutes and hours, I don't know. Like just inputting the data, I probably spent 4 or 5 hours in the first instance getting the bones of it up, and that was the bit that I found out there was another version of it that I could have scraped from.
Yeah, because there's been so many presidents of America, it's hard to keep track of who's who. Just like the British politics.
Well, yes, but I mean, it's a little bit easier to keep track of the president's ones because they're off unless something happens. They always begin and end their terms in the sort of 4 or 8 year period, so it's easier to remember. And also, there've been nowhere near as many presidents as there have been prime ministers.
Um, and so now we officially come towards the end of this wonderful interview, and this is now your time to promote anything that you are either doing or have done, or where people can see you on either online or in the human flesh.
Lovely. Well, you can see me online if you follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at the Ted Hill. You can find my thoughts and feelings on there. And if you want to see my human flesh, then best chance is at Vault Festival in London at the start of next year. My show is called Ted Hill Tries and Fails to Fix Climate Change, and it's on, I believe, the 31st of January and the 1st of February 2023. I'd love it if you came to those. That would be heavenly.
There you go. So now we have learned so much more about Ted Hill. Now your fandom can grow even bigger than it already has.
Fantastic.
Because the more people that see you, the more people will be cured of sadness and be laughing the way all the way to
Yeah, I'm not gonna cure people of sad. I don't want to have that pressure on me. I'm not gonna cure anyone. If you're sad, you should see a doctor. I can't help you with that. Only if the doctor prescribes me should you go with that. Go with what the doctor says.
And so there we have it. That is another wonderful episode of Joking Apart. Now, you might be wondering, Tom, what's going to happen to Joking Apart? Woo! Well, it's going to go on hiatus for a small while whilst I get the next guest sorted. And who knows? Will the next guest be in Britain or will the next guest be in another country? Who knows? I don't know.
I think it's going to be another country based on that.
Yeah. Who knows? And so there we have it. Now, if you want to see more interviews by Memoir, me, you can go and check out the plethora of other YouTube channels. I have 12 other ones, so you can sort of find out where my interviews are. So the main ones watch are Tom Mason, Taskmaster World, and The Weird Side. For clips of interviews, like bizarre moments where someone said something and I couldn't stop laughing at it, go to TGM Production, the production company behind this podcast, and then go to The Short World of Tom Mason, where you can see Josh Thompson, Justin Smith, and Steve McNeil doing all bizarre things all at the same time. And so, thank you guys for watching and listening, and thank you to Ted for coming on to the brand new podcast. Hopefully it's as successful as Absolutely Buzzing, because that's quite successful. But now you've been on it, it probably will get even more successful because each comedian makes it a tad bit more successful.
Well, lovely. I hope to bring my dozens of fans along with me.
4.5 million to be exact. So, thank you guys for watching, and remember, no, I've forgotten.